Hello there! In this video, I'll review Obi-Wan Kenobi as a series and explain what makes it the fourth prequel in my eyes. Yeah, I know it's way too late for this review, but due to other things happening with me a few months ago, I never got around to wrapping up my review of the whole series. So I decided that I do still want to do this video out of respect for people that worked on the show. I already did a video on the first half of the series, which you can check out with the link in the top right there. For this one, I'm starting with the fourth episode, and I'll just go in chronological order, starting from there, calling out anything I feel is worth sharing. And at the end, I'll talk about the series as a whole, talk about things that I think could have made it better, things I would have done differently, and things that I thought really worked. So let's get started with the beginning of the fourth episode. Here, Obi-Wan's in the bacta tank, and we see the burns that he got from the last episode. I would have preferred that these burns be more severe, because the whole point of this is that it's like what happens to Vader/Anakin at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He's doing to Obi-Wan what was done to him. But what happens to Vader was much, much worse than this. I get you can make the argument he wants to prolong Obi-Wan's pain, but I mean, I feel like he should do more than this. Just let him burn on his side for a few seconds, not take any of his limbs off. Like that, come on, really? Ultimately, we all know that your pain has just begun is just an excuse for holding back the violence to maximize young viewership potential, which really just ends up being patronizing to most viewers. I mean, this is a violent universe. People have got blasters, laser swords. Let's just accept that it's a violent place. One continuity thing that a lot of people have pointed out is how Obi-Wan knowing Leia in this series doesn't really make sense with A New Hope, how she sends him that message seemingly implying that they don't know each other. My beef with this is that it's a problem that has a pretty simple solution. All the writers needed to do to fix this is make it so Leia only ever hears his name as Ben and never as Obi-Wan, so that she never connects that Ben and Obi-Wan are the same person. And somehow, someway, professional writers missed this simple solution. First, in this scene, Reva calls him Obi-Wan, but I could swear that the first time I saw this, Leia also referred to him as Obi-Wan, but rewatching it, it doesn't happen, so I wonder if they went in and changed this. Maybe I'm wrong, but ultimately it doesn't make a difference because in the last episode, Leia does call him Obi-Wan. So by examining the staff credits, I think I may have found how this fell through the cracks. The first two episodes list story by Hossein Amini and Stuart Beattie. Then in the third episode's credits, it instead says written by Joby Harold and Hannah Friedman and Hossein Amini and Stuart Beattie. So the way Amini and Beattie are listed second here could suggest that really they're mainly being credited for setting the episode up, but really they're not doing most of the writing anymore. Then episode 4's credits just says written by Joby Harold and Hannah Friedman. So based on this information, I bet that Hossein Amini and Stuart Beattie did intend for Leia to only ever hear his name as Ben. They had this figured out, then in episode 4, Joby Harold and Hannah Friedman messed it up. I suppose there was some kind of internal miscommunication and it just ended up falling through the cracks. Oh well, nothing to be done about it now. Moving on, here these guys are making their plan and they say that Fortress Inquisitorius has no shields. Yeah, that's way too convenient. They should have went for something like the shields don't go underwater or something. That's much more believable. And how could Tala's cover still be intact? Is no one looking for her? Doesn't she report to someone? Did no one find it strange that she didn't report in? Now let's move on to once they're inside. Hey lady, why are you whispering to yourself? Really, the issue here is the set. Given what needs to be shot here, why on earth would you have it set up as this huge open room where everyone can see each other real well? How about cubicles? That would make this so much more believable, and honestly I think it would be better artistically as well if she were in this little cramped space trying to do all this secret agent stuff and not being caught. It would echo how she feels and the situation that she's in. Furthermore, how could she have knocked a guy out without anyone noticing? I get that they just need a reason for her not to be able to speak to Obi-Wan in this moment, but they should have just thought of something else, like someone standing behind her so she can't really talk. Here we find out that Fortress Inquisitorius is a tomb. This is perfect. I can't believe that I have never noticed how much it looks like a tombstone, or almost even a pyramid. One thing that recent Star Wars content has done well is using shapes to have meaning. This looks like a tomb, and also some structures, like for example some of the temples in Rogue One look like tuning forks because they are like tuning forks, which is used in Fallen Order as well. As I recall, one of the structures on Bogano has this tuning fork shape, and also some of the structures on Zepho have it. So if you find this interesting, you may want to rewatch some Star Wars content and see if you notice a trend in how things are shaped. Moving on, here Leia's hiding under Obi-Wan's coat. Really? Are you kidding me, Deborah Chow? Have them sneak around or towing a crate or something with Leia in it. This may take the cake as the cheapest thing I have ever seen in Star Wars. Recently, they've kind of gone down this road of you can always fool the Empire, but it's cheap. The audience sees it for what it is, an excuse for cheap writing and presentation. I'll use 2 examples to try to clarify where exactly this line should be. Is it too far for Cassian Andor to be able to walk into an Imperial base wearing a disguise looking like he belongs there and to steal something? No. Is it too far for Tala to be able to boss her way through this checkpoint to get to where she needs to go? Yes. Believable presentation does not have to be complicated. As they're making their escape, Wade dies. I respect this. This makes it so they had to pay a price. One of the things that drives fans crazy about Rebels is that it takes forever for any of the main characters to have to pay a price for anything. So here, thanks to Wade, they had to pay a price for victory. Vader barging in, force-choking Reva, and shouting at her is terrific. I love how it catches the audience off guard and almost jump scares them. Many have already said this, but I will say it again, the de-aging here looks abysmal. However, I understand their dilemma here. Regardless of how you feel about Hayden Christensen's portrayal of Anakin in the prequels, part of what's going on here is he's getting another shot at the role. He was heavily criticized for his portrayal of Anakin in those films, and he's being given a chance to rectify that. In this training duel with Obi-Wan, I'd say his acting is pretty good, and a lot of that is coming from these laugh lines here, which weren't there 20 years ago. So if they had completely de-aged him and thus removed these laugh lines, then they would have really minimized a lot of his facial expressions, which would have been very unfortunate because he's acting very well here. So could more have been done here to make him look younger while keeping the performance intact? Maybe, but you know what? The dilemma is understandable. The duel itself is also very well choreographed. Way too many people overlook how good a swordsman Hayden Christensen is. Moving on, Tala sacrifices herself in this episode. I like this stuff, it's fitting for her character, and once again they had to pay a price. Hey, what are the two of you whispering about? Yeah, so this should have been staged differently so that they're not whispering in front of everyone. Many have also criticized their plan here, but honestly I'm cool with it. I mean, it's not like there are many good ways to assassinate Darth Vader. The way Vader just grabs the ship and holds it here is awesome. I love how it displays how powerful he is. This moment is particularly well acted by Hayden Christensen. He's disappointed in himself, but also trying to hold it back a bit not to let on how disappointed he really is. Vader toying with Reva here is awesome. It's very well choreographed, and once again it displays just how powerful Vader is compared to most Force sensitives. I've decided that I don't like Rupert Friend's portrayal of the Grand Inquisitor. I much prefer how Jason Isaacs portrayed him in Rebels. Rupert Friend just doesn't really sell him as a leader. You know, who I think would have been really great in this role is Matt Smith, and Lucasfilm has tried to bring him into Star Wars before. I wonder if they did try to cast him in this role and it just didn't work out because he was busy filming House of the Dragon. I also think Jason Isaacs would have been good in the role. I mean, why not just have the voice actor play the role? He's a terrific actor. Maybe they asked him and he said no for some reason. Now, in regards to the appearance, my issue here isn't that he doesn't look like the Rebels version, it's that he doesn't look like other live-action Utapauans. The head should be much longer than this, and these creases should be much deeper. Now, this whole Luke scare that they try to do here just doesn't work, because we know that he doesn't die. One could make the same case about Vader and Obi-Wan, but that has a lot more going for it. That's the rematch of the century right there. That's one of the greatest characters in cinematic history coming face to face with the man who took him away from his mom, then chopped off his limbs and let him burn alive. This whole Luke thing doesn't have nearly as much going for it, and we know what happens. Wow, Reva got up, dressed her wound, and made it to Tatooine awfully fast, didn't she? One could say that we don't really know how much time has gone by, however, in Obi-Wan's arc it seems like not very much time has gone by at all. What unfortunately plagues a very good finale is that they tried to pace these two arcs evenly, and it just doesn't work. Here it doesn't make sense from a chronological standpoint, and it has another issue which I'll talk about more when it comes up later. Also, how could they not have used this as the opening shot? It's a clone of the original Star Wars opening shot, except angled downward instead of upward. This would have been the perfect way to open this show's finale. Here Vader decides to tail Obi-Wan, but why can't they just follow both ships? He ends up using a shuttle anyway, so why can't he go after Obi-Wan and the Star Destroyer go after the other ship? Now the rematch of the century begins between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Another thing I want to mention that recent Star Wars content has done well is taking how Vader, Luke, and Obi-Wan used lightsabers in the original trilogy and turning it into fighting styles. Even though so much more goes into duels now, we can still see elements of how those characters used their lightsabers back then and how they duel now. This is especially well displayed in the way Vader fights in this duel. This is where the constant cutting to Tatooine really starts to get annoying. The idea is for the arcs to amplify each other, but it just doesn't work because one is so much better than the other. All that really ends up happening is the audience is annoyed that they were taken away from the Vader-Obi-Wan duel. So yeah, the major flaw with this finale is that this pacing just doesn't work. They should have just done the Vader-Obi-Wan arc first and the Reva-Luke arc second. The duel resumes and continues to be great. Then Vader uses fissure and Obi-Wan ends up trapped under these rocks. Many fans have said that this is where Obi-Wan should have heard Qui-Gon's voice, but that would have messed up the Obi-Wan needing closure thing, which really they intend as his main arc for the series. So my idea is that he should have had a flashback in which he recalls Qui-Gon's teachings, but doesn't actually communicate with his ghost. That way he could have used the whole calm yourself down and allow the Force to move through you thing to get himself out, just like he did in the Duel of Fates. That would have been terrific from all standpoints, and it wouldn't have ruined the plot. I also want to bring up that yes, the high ground is reversed here, but Obi-Wan manages to do what Anakin could not in pulling himself out of the darkness. I like this from a poetic standpoint, but ultimately I think we'd be making a mistake in equating Obi-Wan here to what Anakin was going through during Revenge of the Sith. Anakin's circumstances were just so different. He was having visions of his wife dying in childbirth. Ultimately, it's understandable that he couldn't pull himself out of the darkness. The duel resumes, and something has changed in Obi-Wan, and he starts to get the upper hand. This part where he's smashing Vader's chest piece takes a bit too long to be believable. Now we've arrived at the most important part of this review. The dialogue between Obi-Wan Kenobi and what's left of his Padawan starts. Obi-Wan apologizes to Anakin for his role in what's happened to him. Vader responds saying, "I am not your failure," referencing their dialogue from the Mustafar duel. The way he's denying that Obi-Wan is really what's ultimately responsible for what happened to him, I'm wondering if really deep down Vader wants to give him some closure, and that's what's happening here. Even though Obi-Wan doesn't get the result he's hoping for, the fact that he apologized gives him closure. By lifting this heavy burden from his shoulders, he can ultimately become the wise Obi-Wan that we know from A New Hope. And it makes it so he can see Qui-Gon. The line, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did," is perfect. It fits with the other canon portrayals of the characters very well, and makes Obi-Wan telling Luke that Vader killed his father so much cooler. It wasn't something that Obi-Wan was making up, he was telling Luke exactly what Vader told him. And I love how this sets up Obi-Wan and Yoda discouraging Luke from trying to save his father. They don't believe that there still is any good in him, unlike Padme and Luke, who can sense that there is. Now this next part is why I decided to do this review even though it's way too late for it. I think that most people that watch this show are misinterpreting what the writers intend as the outcome of this duel. If you ask most people what the outcome of the duel was, they'll likely say that Kenobi won, but I don't think that's what the writers intend at all. Remember, a huge part of what made Anakin prone to the dark side is his need for victory, and that's also a huge part of why he struggles to break free of it after his turn, because in his eyes admitting that he was wrong to embrace the dark side would be admitting a defeat. It takes him until the end of Return of the Jedi to break free of that pettiness, and that really shows as he tries to resume the duel. Hence, I think that what the writers intend for us to see here is Vader beating himself and Obi-Wan walking away. Obi-Wan isn't petty, he's really a very content man, so he doesn't have that endless need for victory to feel this sense of superiority over others like Vader does. So he's okay with walking away without having definitively won the duel. That's what Anakin/Vader is simply unwilling to do, and he doesn't realize how much that hinders him. So that's what I think the writers are going for here, and I think that's terrific. I think that deserves a lot of praise. It's very relatable. A lot of people have been like this at some point in their lives, perhaps when they were younger. Also, these days it's really a shame how few people manage to overcome this in their lives. So that's my interpretation of what's going on here, and I really love it. Some people argue that it doesn't make sense for Obi-Wan to give up a chance at killing one of the Sith Lords because it would help the galaxy to kill them. But what happened when he defeated Darth Maul? He was replaced. When Anakin killed Count Dooku, he was replaced. So if he had killed Vader, then Sidious would have just replaced him. Yoda understood this in Revenge of the Sith. He knew you have to kill them both or one will just be replaced. One thing I think could have been better about this scene is this slow monster-like approach could have been better. I think it should have been longer and the music should have been sadder. Now I've got to mention this yell. This is awesome, and it's better the louder it is. For me, everything I just said about my interpretation of this duel is encompassed by this moment. Vader's directing his frustration at Obi-Wan to avoid confronting himself and his own failures, his own mistakes. Moving on, here Reva gets her chance at revenge. One of the reasons for cutting between the two story arcs was setting up this timing, but it still wasn't really necessary because she waited until nighttime to engage, so they could have just worked around that to set it up. They should have just done Reva's whole arc after the duel and then had Obi-Wan sense that Luke was in danger after his ship emerged from hyperspace instead of before. That being said, I do like what's going on with Reva here. She has her chance at revenge, but to get it she needs to kill a child, just like she watched Vader do to her friends. And Moses Ingram really nails this moment pretty well. Then she brings Luke back to the farm and speaks with Obi-Wan. Her arc ends very satisfyingly with her overcoming her desire for revenge. I like how Obi-Wan succeeds in helping Reva with a conflict that's kind of like what he failed to help Anakin with. It's not quite the same as Anakin, but revenge is still pettiness in a way. The resolution to this series is really when Obi-Wan says, "Now you're free," we both are. They both overcame obstacles and got closure. The next scene shows Vader in a similar position. He tries to convince Sidious and himself that he has overcome his past, but as fans we know that he never really does. And that's part of his character. So he tries to attribute all his feelings of defeat and failure to Anakin and tells himself that he isn't Anakin to avoid having to accept that they are his failures and his defeats. So I like how this scene echoes that and shows him failing where Obi-Wan and Reva succeeded. This is a nice little resolution between Obi-Wan and Leia, but again, she needs to call him Ben, not Obi-Wan. After this, Obi-Wan goes to see Owen on the farm. Recent Star Wars content has used Owen's disapproval as the reason for why Obi-Wan doesn't train Luke as a boy. I'm more on board with this than I used to be, but I still wish there was an element of Obi-Wan doubting the teachings of the Jedi, which is the direction I thought they might be going in when Obi-Wan was talking about having memories of his family. Perhaps that's something to be explored in future content. One actor who unfortunately didn't get much screen time is Grant Feely, and he is priceless as Luke. I mean, look at that smile. He sells Luke's natural sense of curiosity so well. At the very end, Obi-Wan finally manages to see Qui-Gon's ghost. I found this scene very underwhelming. I mean, he's been trying to reach Qui-Gon for 10 years, and all we get is, "Oh hey, there you are, really?" That being said, Qui-Gon's dialogue is good, and it is great to see Liam Neeson in Star Wars again. And again, this scene at the end is why they didn't have Obi-Wan hear Qui-Gon's voice under the rocks, because it would ruin this whole thing. So now that we've talked about the second half of the series, let's just talk about the series as a whole. It has some good creative elements that suit the canon well, and it has a great lightsaber duel. It's also loaded with writing and filmmaking issues. You know what else that could be said about? The prequels. So that's ultimately why I decided to title this review The Fourth Prequel, because it has the same strengths and weaknesses of those movies and also stars some of the same actors. Would I rather it only have the strengths and not the weaknesses? Yes. But there is a sort of joy, a certain nostalgia in celebrating those movies for what they are and not pretending that they're something they're not. I decided to give Obi-Wan Kenobi a 7 out of 10. I think the good elements carry it well enough to warrant it being higher than a 6, and the writing and filmmaking issues hinder it to the point that I just can't justify giving it an 8. For me, the biggest issue is the concealed violence. It's just become patronizing. And that's not just an issue with this show, that's something that a lot of recent Star Wars content has done. They try to sneak it in on things that don't have faces, like for example, it's acceptable for a stormtrooper to be cut in half because that has no face, but they won't make the burns on Obi-Wan more severe because he has a face. If you've played Fallen Order, then you know that you can cut limbs off certain creatures. However, when it comes to things that are like a person, you can only cut off a robotic limb. The only reason that limb is robotic is for the purpose of the player being able to cut it off without it being too violent, and it's just patronizing for the creators to think that we won't notice something like that. So if I had to pick one thing for new Star Wars content to do better, it would be to commit more to the violence. Another thing is I found some of the settings underwhelming. The elaborate, wacky sci-fi settings are part of Star Wars. The settings for Kenobi were just kinda simple. I was particularly disappointed in Mapuzo. I get that they want the first meeting between Vader and Obi-Wan to be like Tatooine but corrupted with technology like how Vader is, but it's just not enough technology. The performances all around are pretty good. Some have criticized Moses Ingram's acting. In my opinion, I think she's just underwhelming compared to the other stars. She was fine, but Ewan McGregor, Vivian Lyra Blair, and Hayden Christensen were really good. I think that the writers had more planned for Reva, but very little of what they had written actually made it into the final cut. For those who don't know, the vision of what exactly Obi-Wan Kenobi would be was constantly changing throughout production. I don't remember all the specifics, but I think it started as a movie, then became a series, and there may have been more changes in between. And as a result, the script was constantly being rewritten and changed. So how does that affect Reva? Well, her story feels incomplete, like the writers intended for her plan to assassinate Vader to be hinted a bit more, and maybe they intended for us to see more scenes of her group of younglings trying to escape Order 66. So it seems like whenever changes needed to be made to move screen time around, Reva's story is the one that took most of that blow. Another thing that could have been better about Reva, but really is a bigger issue with Star Wars as a whole right now, is in order to sell villains as evil and as powerful, we need to see them succeeding in being evil and powerful. For Force wielders, that comes in the form of defeating other Force wielders. And we never see Reva do that. We don't see how Nari dies, and sure, she does stab the Grand Inquisitor, but that's more her just catching him by surprise than actually defeating him. So another thing that new Star Wars content can do better is make the villains better by showing them succeeding. One question a lot of people are asking is, will there be a season 2? I honestly hope that they just leave it at this one season. Doing this at all was pushing it as it is because it retcons Vader and Obi-Wan's duel in A New Hope being the first time they had seen each other since Mustafar. One could argue that Vader and Kenobi wouldn't have to meet again in the season 2, and that's fair, but still doing more with just Obi-Wan, giving him more conflicts, kind of ruins him evolving into the A New Hope Obi-Wan. That being said, I do have a guess as to what Lucasfilm would want to do in a season 2, and there is a way it could work. My guess is that they would want to bring Ray Park back as Darth Maul and have him serve as the primary antagonist. However, that would retcon when Maul and Kenobi meet in Rebels being the first time the two characters had seen each other since the Clone Wars. And I feel like that's too much. I mean, we've already retconned the story between Vader and Kenobi, so I feel like retconning this one too is a mistake. The only way I could really see that working is if the series were to end with Maul thinking that the Empire had gotten Kenobi. That's the only ending I can see that wouldn't change Rebels too much. One thing they could do with Maul that would be exciting in a Kenobi Season 2 would be if Maul were to fight Darth Vader. I mean, in Rebels, Maul says that he can't defeat Vader alone, seemingly implying that he has tried before. So that's something I've been hoping to see on screen for a long time now. However, there are better things they could do with Darth Maul. Like I said before, to make villains good, we need to see them succeed, and I feel like there's a lot of potential in making content in which Maul succeeds. One of the things I dream about when I imagine myself working in film is I would want to do a Darth Maul series. It would start during the time that Maul rules Mandalore, and Count Dooku would challenge him for the throne just like Maul challenged Pre Vizsla. Then Maul and Dooku would have an awesome lightsaber duel. There would also be a lightsaber duel between Savage Opress and General Grievous that actually occurs on a battlefield. And I would want Jason Momoa to play Savage. As soon as I thought of that, a light bulb went off in my head and I was like, yeah, I've got to make sure I put this in the video. Jason Momoa as Savage Opress would be awesome. So back on subject, yeah, I don't want a Kenobi Season 2, but I do think there is potential in using the characters in other shows. A Maul series would be terrific, Ewan McGregor could appear as Obi-Wan in Ahsoka via flashbacks, and Reva could appear in The Mandalorian, Andor, or The Bad Batch. So that's all I have to say in this review of Obi-Wan Kenobi, or as I call it, the fourth prequel. Please subscribe, like, and share, it really helps me out a whole lot, and if you want to add anything, please let me know in the comments. See you next time.